So, welcome to the presentation today. We're going to be talking a lot about the details of the importance of instructions and descriptions and the power that you can actually get out of these different things. And the reason that this is going to be we're going to start with generative orchestration specifically is because it's really important to understand that how generative orchestration works inside of Copilot Studio, because this is the thing that's consuming the instructions and the descriptions that you are putting into your agent. So if you're not overly familiar with this, just be aware that the way that Copilot Studio works as an end-to-end SaaS is it has something called generative orchestration, or the orchestrator. And this happens when you flip on the switch to move from classic orchestration to generative orchestration. And what you'll find is that by doing this, what will happen is when a user says something, what's going to happen is they're going to be prompted. It's going to look at all the different tools and all the different components inside of Copilot Studio, inside of that agent. And it's going to try to figure out what is the right tools or the combinations of things to be able to answer the question that the user asks. And the way that it does that, it looks heavily at the instructions and the descriptions that are associated to all of these different things, from topics to tools and other aspects within Copilot Studio. And so when we start looking at this, what you want to be able to understand is how can you kind of nudge these things to be able to get what you want out of it. So it builds a plan and executes the plan how you would expect. Again, it'll run all of these different tools and all these different components, and then what you'll get is a unified response coming back from the Copilot Studio implementation or the Copilot Studio agent, because of the fact that that orchestrator has figured out it needs to talk to maybe 3 or 4 different tools to be able to go figure out what it needs to do. And then it's going to summarize that all into one response that comes back, so that you don't just get a bunch of data dumps from all over the place. And so this is a very powerful component of Copilot Studio. So let's go to the next slide and we'll talk a little bit more about some of the details of what we're looking at. So Grant, we'll talk about instructions here a bit. So instructions are going to really give us the way to be able to say how the agent's going to operate. So when you think about when you put in your instructions, what we run into a lot is people kind of trying to figure out how to put stuff in. And what you're wanting to understand is that what should you put into instructions? Well, an example of what you should be putting in is how you want it to behave. You want it to do this, but don't do this. Use this particular tool in this specific way. There's the ability for you to even use a slash to be able to call out a specific tool. So you can say, when using this or when using this agent, behave in this particular way. Again, these are going to be things that you would put into instructions. Another thing is that you should think about is how you're going to format this in. You can say that, how do you want it to get formatted? So if you want to say that you respond back with bullet points or inside of a table or things like this, we can actually do that inside of instructions. Now, I would even include that you can even give logic, like when using this tool, also go do this afterwards. And also know that you can go in and say things like, you want it to be able to encourage the user, or when it's responding, like what kind of style do you want it to do, or never talk about this particular thing. All of those things in instructions are going to be very powerful for you to be able to make sure that the agent understands who it is, what it's doing, and how that should behave, and what it should and shouldn't do, or how to execute as part of what it's doing. So now if we move and we compare this over to what's inside of descriptions, in descriptions, what we're going to have here is this is where you're explaining to the agent what this particular thing does. So when we think about this, you can say, this tool places a sales order, or this tool looks up contact information, or when searching for an account, only find accounts in France, or things like this. And so what we're really getting down to is that a description is going to explain when that tool should be executed. And so think of it, before we were talking about how should it behave, how should it think about like how should it be able to do this and then do this other thing. In this case, if you have your descriptions populated very well, then what you'll find is that you don't really need to include that into your instructions. Now, if you had something where you wanted to say, hey, every time you create a purchase order, make sure you go ahead and get an approval, then this is something you can do in instructions, where in descriptions, you're going to explain this tool creates the purchase order and things of that nature. The other part of it is because of the fact that the descriptions are even on the inputs and the outputs that you get, you can also include descriptions on your inputs and outputs to explain what kind of format are you looking for. So if you're trying to do what we call entity extraction, like you're looking for a state code and you want the state to be a 2-character state code all in caps, or you need to do airport codes or something like this, you can explain that's what you're looking for as part of the input, and it will take care of that. So an example would be like if I said, what are all the accounts in Texas? Being able to see that it would convert the words Texas to TX or something like that to make it optimized for that particular tool so that the query executes properly inside of your data. That's going to be a key part of what you can do inside of descriptions. And it also lets you say, maybe you want to collect one of many different things. You can do that as well inside of descriptions. And so I'm going to turn over to Grant really quick to kind of talk about some of the best practices, some of the things that we've seen that can kind of help you guys in that. And then we'll be going into a lot of demonstrations and things like this to show you guys real world kind of scenarios and where we can start playing with this so that you can get a more advanced view of how you can use instructions and descriptions in conjunction with other componentry inside of Copilot Studio to really revolutionize the way that you're building. So with that, I'll hand over to my coworker, Grant. Grant, go ahead.
So we want to hop into the demos quickly if we can. But before we do, we just kind of want to talk about putting this all together. So one of the things that Dwayne and I have seen when we work with customers is a very common scenario is a large instruction set in the overview of the agent. So there'll be pages and pages of instructions on doing certain things, and we want to kind of demo and talk through how if we give the orchestrator some good descriptions and you empower it to make the right decisions, you don't have to be so declarative in your instructions. So you can be really smart and intelligent about how you're informing the planner and the orchestrator on how to use the tools and the agents you have, so we don't have to write big, long paragraphs of instructions when doing so. So kind of one of the things that we try to do when we begin doing the instruction development is starting with a very simple instruction set and fine-tune our agent's execution and nudging the agent when necessary, as opposed to writing a big declarative list of instructions on what to do. We kind of start with allowing the orchestrator to do what it does, and then we will just kind of gently nudge it in certain directions as we need. Now, I got to tell you, being a kind of a developer type myself, I think very much an if-then-else type logic, and so I do understand the desire to build like a very declarative instruction set and to do those sorts of things, but with Copilot Studio and with the power of the orchestrator and large language models, we have the ability to not be so declarative and just kind of use it, let it do what it does, and we can just nudge it in certain directions. The other thing that we want to highlight too is the use of tools and child agents with good descriptions really allows you to modularize your agent. So if you think about maintenance of your agent, for example, if you have the ability to break pieces of the agent up into, say, like child agents or these tools, and it's not just in one big instruction set. If you're trying to version your instruction set or you're trying to make changes to your instruction set, as you test it, modularization of these sorts of things really allows you to kind of decrease the surface area of when you make changes, where the changes need to be tested and so forth, and kind of really allows you to make it easier to test and maintain your agent. And so with that, we're gonna hop into. I want to hop into some demos here. So I'm going to. We're going to, let's see here. Get out of my slideshow. Hopefully. And let's see. We're going to hop into an agent. So what we've done is we put together kind of an agent here that will kind of demonstrate some of the concepts we're discussing here. And so what we have here is we have an account data lookup agent. And the agents allows us to find contacts and accounts in our Dataverse environment using natural language in a conversational way. So as you can see that we've kind of given the description of the agent here, this is what it does. This agent contains two child agents. It contains a contact agent and an account agent. So what I want to do is I want to kind of talk about if we look at the agent here, in the overview section, we have some instructions. As you can see, we have a very limited set of instructions. We've basically given it two instructions. The first instruction includes some instructions to include the text sample if you're working with the sample data for Dataverse. So that's in the event that this agent was wired up to Dataverse sample data, we're accounting for that. The second instruction is to let the agent know that we don't want to offer the ability to export or create a file, since our agent doesn't support that. So as you can see, right now we have very limited instructions in our agent here, and we're going to move on now to the child agent. So this agent has two child agents. It has an account agent and a contact agent. Okay, so we're going to look at the account agent first. The account agent's job is to provide information and perform tasks for accounts. So if we look at this for a second, we'll see a few things. First of all, we give it a good name. And second of all, we give it a good description. This description is really used to inform the orchestrator when to use this tool. Next, we have some instructions, and as you can see, we have a very limited set of instructions. They're very limited in scope, and they're telling the Copilot Studio when this agent is used, which tools to use, and in what order to execute them. So now we can see that this agent has a couple of tools. It has two tools. It has a find account tool, and it has a get account details tool. So what we can, if we look at the find account tools tool, as you can see, we've got something, a very similar configuration. We give it a descriptive name, and we give it a good description of what's doing. And we don't, so, and then we have some inputs that we're going to provide to this tool. We won't get too much into what this tool is doing. But it's basic because there's going to be additional content coming regarding this tool. But it's a very powerful way to search Dataverse that's not widely known. But what I do want to highlight here is one of the inputs is the search input, and so this is where we again what we're doing is we're allowing the dynamically fill with AI, and we're instructing the orchestrator what we want it to do. So we can see that we're asking it to search. This is the search query, and we're giving it some details about what exactly we want it to do, and we're going to allow the orchestrator to slot fill this as needed when it works its magic. So that is kind of a quick rundown of the account agent. The next thing is the contact agent, and the contact agent is configured very similarly to the account agent. We give it some good descriptions. We give it some very simple instructions. We gave it a couple of tools. But what I wanted to highlight here in regards to the contact agent is we've given it something a little interesting as well. So we've said when you're asked to create a note, always confirm that the note is correct before you submit it. It's possible to do the same thing by configuring a topic, but as you can see, we don't need a topic. Doing it this way is allowing the power of generative AI and large language models to guide that conversation in a less structured or declarative way. And so we just added some simple instructions to kind of demonstrate, I've seen many cases and potentially you might need to do it, but where you'll have an agent that has, I don't know, 40 topics, let's say. And so we're just demonstrating here the ability where you don't necessarily required to do that unless you need to. If you want to have a little more conversational way, you have the ability to use the instructions in your child agent to do that. The final thing I want to highlight here is, as you can see, it has very similar tools, but there's one additional thing I wanted to highlight. So there's a tool here to create a note for a contact. And again, we're doing the same sort of things. We're creating a note for a contact. We're giving it a good description. We're creating some inputs for this. And one of the things we're saying is that when you create a note, it's going to be regarding a certain contact. So in the description, we're telling it, hey, this is what this is. It's the GUID of the contact to create the note for, but the format should be in this format. Now, the reason that's important is because this is kind of a unique thing for Dataverse, but when you're creating a note and you're relating it back to another entity, there's a kind of unique format that's required. So what we're doing here is we're just using the description field to tell the orchestrator, when you create the note, format this attribute this way. So that kind of concludes the tour here of our little agent. And so now what we want to do is we're going to test it out. So first thing we're going to do is we've got some sample data here in Dataverse, and we're going to ask the agent. We're going to ask the agent, what are the accounts in Texas? Okay, and so as this is executing, we're going to find something interesting here. So the first thing that this does is it goes and it looks for the accounts, all the accounts in Texas, and it finds all of them. Okay. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to ask our agent. So the second account is this Coho Winery that's in Dallas. So we're going to ask it, who is the primary contact for the second one? And hopefully, our agent is going to go, and so as we see now, the first prompt used the account agent because it knew we were asking about accounts. The second prompt used the contact agent because it knew we were asking for contacts. So it went out and it found that the primary contact for Coho Winery is John Doe. Okay, and so we can see it gave us some additional details on John Doe, and so we're going to ask, how old is John? And so we can see the birth date is here, but what we're showing here is that the orchestrator has the ability to look up the birth date for John, convert it, and then do the calculations to tell us that John is 40 years old. So from there, I want to kind of run us through a different, kind of like a different scenario here. So let's pretend that I went to Starbucks to grab a coffee. When I was there, I ran into the primary contact for Coho Winery. So I don't remember what the person's name is. So I'm going to ask our agent, who is the primary contact for Coho Winery? And in doing that, I think we're going to look up to find out the primary contact is John. And when I was there, we had a conversation. They told me, oh, hey, we're moving in 3 months. And so I'm going to ask my agent to create a note that I ran into John at Starbucks and that they're moving in 3 months. Now, what we're doing here is we're kind of showing the idea of like dynamic chaining and those sorts of things. That the agent is remembering the context of our conversation. And so it's going to, hopefully, it's going to go and it's going to say, oh, yeah, okay, I'm going to go look up John and I'm going to create a note for him. But if you remember in our instructions, we asked it, hey, before you create a note, please confirm that it's right. So we can see the agent is executing instructions in our contact agent. And before it calls the tool to create the note, it's confirming that, is this what you want the note to be? And I'm going to say, yes, that is the note I want to be. Okay. So now our agent goes in and creates the note. And then as you can see in, if I look at John's record in Dataverse, here is my note that I just created. Oh, I ran into John Doe at Starbucks and they're moving in 3 months. So as you can see, we're able to put together some pretty cool functionality in our Copilot agents by using instructions and descriptions to arm the orchestrator with the information it needs and to make the right decisions without writing out pages and pages of instructions. So with that, I'm going to hand it back over to Dwayne because I think Dwayne has a really cool demo on a procurement scenario that can show even more, highlight even more of the capabilities of combining instructions with descriptions. So Dwayne, I'll hand it over to you.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Grant. I'm going to share my screen really quick here for you guys. And what we're going to look at here is what we decided. Grant and I were working together on an initiative, and we decided what we wanted to do was we wanted to take an SAP Ariba system, and we wanted to be able to get information from it and be able to go through a procurement scenario. And when we went about looking at this, we said, you know what, there's actually a lot involved with what we're trying to do. So when we went to build it, we said, okay, well, we need to give it some base instructions on how the different agents are going to work. And in certain scenarios, we wanted to answer technical questions using the IT agent, because the procurement catalogs, while they have all this information about different products to be able to purchase, the actual authoritative place to be able to get answers around, like, I don't know, a PC configuration is actually going to be better served by the IT agent, which has access to knowledge around all the different devices and such. As well as we started seeing, like, there's a difference between we want to figure out, we want to order something versus we want to actually purchase it, so you can go through a purchase request. So when we looked at this, we also said, you know, there's a lot of different pieces of asset and knowledge that we want to bring in. Maybe we want it to also be able to just do general chit chat and things of this nature. And if we go look at our actual agent configuration really quick, you'll see here that we said, hey, we want to have this HR agent, we want to have this IT agent, we want to have a procurement agent, and the procurement agent is going to do things that are associated to procurement. So when we look at this, you can see we've given it an explanation and a description on what this does. And you can see that we even went further and gave it some additional instructions, and then we gave it a couple of tools as well. And by giving it all of this, we were able to give it the understanding that it needs to be able to do things. And so we can say, oh, well, we have two different vendor catalogs that we want to choose from. One is going to be around computers, and the other one's around chemicals and gas. And when you look at this particular configuration, the reason this is important, and you go, wait a minute, you said you were going to do this in SAP Ariba, and yet this looks like Dataverse. And the answer is yes, because once you get into a conversation with people who on the SAP system, they're probably not going to want you to just beat down their API with all of these different requests for the product catalog. They actually just want to be able to see that information. So what we've done is we built a cache on the back end from the SAP Ariba system. So in theory, you can actually plug in anything that you would want to this particular backend and just feed this data cache for the catalog, because the catalog's not refreshing a ton. So this allows us to be able to really index and be able to get a good cache of everything that's in the vendor catalog. So then you'll probably ask yourself, well, wait a minute. if you're doing that, then how do you handle the actual purchase request? Well, that's where we go in and we say for the purchase request, we go through this process and we've explained inside of our purchase request agent how to use these different tools. And notice that in the tools that we have here, we have it where what we're going to do is inside of Dataverse, we're actually going to form the PR and do all of the work on what a PR needs to look like, the purchase request. And then what we're going to do once we have it is we're going to be able to push it through our Power Automate flow to submit the PR. So the write going back into SAP Ariba is very light to the actual owner of that system. So that system owner is going to be very appreciative of us for not just hitting their API constantly. Now, in the end, what we want to do is we want to see this work from end to end. So let me show you an example of just how robust this is. But there's one last piece I do want to show you before we do that. And that is, I want you to see this agent has 0 custom topics. It is fully built using child agents and the instructions and descriptions to make the entirety of the agent work. And so when you see the end result of this, it's actually quite impressive. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and start asking it to do certain questions. So let's start with I need to find a laptop with 16 gigs of RAM. Can you help me with that? Now, what we're going to see is we're going to watch the agent work in the left-hand pane here. We're going to see it go over, and it's going to say, oh, I need to go to the procurement agent, to the computer vendor catalog search, and it needs to get me the answers to what's available for me. And you'll see here it came back and it gave me a copy. It gave me basically kind of a couple of different options here, but maybe as the user, I don't really know which one weighs the least, because I'm not really sure which one of these I want. So what are we going to see happening? What we're going to see happening is over here on this other side, and here I'll zoom it out just a bit for you so you can see it work. You'll see that it's going over to the IT agent to get information about this particular, these different products that are being offered. And it's going to figure out, based upon going to the knowledge from the IT agent, which one of these weighs the least. And you'll see it running 3 different searches because it needs to run 3 different searches across those different items. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to realize, okay, well, the one that weighs the least is this latitude one. So I'm going to go ahead and say that I want the one with 512 gigabytes SD. I think that's the best one for my needs. So what we're going to have happen is we're going to go back to procurement agent. It's going to go find all of this. And it's going to say, okay, this is the one that you want. And notice what it's asking me. It's asking me for, do I have a quantity? And do I want anything additional in this? Again, the actual instructions are instructing it to form these questions to be able to ask this for me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say I actually need 2 of them, but I need to get some argon, which is what going to go and say, well, I need to look that up in the chemicals location because it's in a different procurement catalog. So what you're going to see it do now is it's going to say, okay, I got that you want 2 of those, but now we have these other options and for the argon, and I'm going to come back and tell it, well, I think the argon, I need the 20-liter one, and I need 4 of those. And so now what we're going to have is it's going to go in, it's going to update our information, and now we have what we've asked for. We've got 2 units of the latitude that we wanted. We got 4 of the argon that we want. This looks great. This is exactly what I'm looking for. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop in and I'm just going to say, yep, that looks good. So now what we'll see it happen is now we're going to the purchase request agent. Now the first thing it's going to do is it's going to create a purchase request. Then it's going to form it with adding an item to each. And then it's going to go and actually submit the PR to the backend system. And when it does that, we'll get back the information and you'll see that we've actually submitted our PR and we got a PR submitted to the backend system. So this is an example of how, if you build using the power of child agents, instructions, and descriptions, how just conversational this can be, and it will assemble the tools and do the things that it needs to do. And all of this is being done with 0 topics in the conversation. So this is the major power that we see of this generative orchestrator. And again, if I go back, I just want to highlight this for you guys. We want to look at how complex are my instructions? Not very complex, right? How complex are the instructions on my different agents? So when we look at these, our instructions are not very complex as we move across these different agents. Like the purchase request agent is not that complex. And how did we actually go about building this? We started by just putting in the descriptions for the tools and configuring the agents to classify them into logical groups. We then took that and we started talking to it and figured out where we needed to nudge it. We didn't start with this whole if then do this and things of that such. We actually went and played with it and tuned it to do what we wanted it to do by nudging those descriptions and those instructions to be able to perform the way that we actually wanted it to perform. So with that, I think, Grant, any additional feedback you want to add to this? Hopefully you guys can see the power of this if done properly.
I'll take over again here, if that's okay, Dwayne. Let me share my screen here in a second. At this point, we kind of just want to summarize the things that we discussed, and we went through a lot of content very quickly. We had some demos, and by the way, Dwayne, that demo was fantastic. Like that was really, really cool. That they were able to do it that way in just such a limited instruction set. But I wanted to just kind of go over some takeaways here. Some of the things that we see, and Dwayne, by all means, chime in if I'm missing something here, but some of the things that we see are, when you have long instructions, sometimes you'll get inconsistent agent behavior or conflicting and unclear how you want the agent to behave. For example, let's say in a child agent or in a prompt or in a tool, I say format the data in a table, but then my overview instructions say format the data in a bulleted list. And then sometimes the orchestrator gets confused, like, what you want a bulleted list? You want a table? So by having long instruction sets, we can see kind of some of the inconsistencies or some conflicting things, and it can kind of drive you crazy as you try to debug it.
And Grant, we also see, if you recall, we always run into this where people put these huge instruction sets in their overview of their agent. And what they don't realize is that's executing on every single turn, guys, right? Whereas the only time that you're executing in the child agent piece, you're only executing those instruction sets when it's orchestrated too. So this will give you some performance enhancements and give you the ability to kind of break it up, not only to Grant's point where it's a logical separation to make it easier for you to figure out when it's going to execute those instructions, but it's also going to help you from a performance management standpoint so that you're not trying to do everything in the overview.
Yeah, that's an excellent point, Dwayne. And that's it. I wholeheartedly here. I agree to that 100%. So the descriptions are a very powerful way to inform the orchestrator what you want to do. And what I would say that is a underutilized tool in your tool belt. From what I can see, and for me as well, as I've gone through it, I didn't fully appreciate the power of just doing that, of giving the orchestrator the information it needs to make the right decisions, and that allows for it's a very, very powerful way to develop these tools and things in a way that you can get some pretty cool results. The modularization, I think we talked about that a little bit, the functional grouping to increase simplicity, reuse, and more efficient testing and maintenance. Specifically, if you have a large instruction set, If you want to change something in one of those things, if you had it in a child agent, you'd only have to really kind of test the child agent. You wouldn't have to test the whole thing all over again to see if something got affected downstream as well. And so that really helps with maintenance and modularization, helps with that the logical grouping. As we saw, especially in Dwayne's demo, the good instructions really unlock dynamic chaining. By saying, "Hey, I want this laptop, but then I want some Argon too. Well, which one do you want?" That really helps to unlock that kind of conversational experience in Copilot Studio for your agents. And then finally, I think Dwayne hit on it really well, but using Dataverse as a data cache is a good architectural pattern. Dataverse is a first-class entity in Copilot Studio. We've had some very good results with it. You have some really powerful tools that you can use with Dataverse, and you get you get a lot of stuff for free when you use Dataverse, like semantic indexing and those sorts of things. So we would really seriously consider using that because we work with multiple customers. I'm sure you have seen this as well, where, if you continue to hit the API, that can really, affect. There's serious concerns about affecting, performance of production systems by continually querying it when you don't necessarily need to do that. And so the last thing I want to do is I wanted to kind of highlight a couple of things. The instruction best practices. There's a blog a document that was written by some of the folks on our team on how to write high quality instructions for generative orchestration. I would suggest looking at that. There's an authoring descriptions topic. Our team has a blog. Part of that is some labs. The agent that I was demoing is in that lab that Dwayne wrote, and so the link to that is there. So if you want to download that agent, or if you want to configure that agent and play with this sorts of stuff, there's a way to do that. And finally, I want to give some press to Dwayne. He's the Copilot Studio dude on YouTube, and I have to tell you, if you are early in your Copilot Studio journey, or you're not even early, there is a wealth of information out there. Dwayne spends a lot of time, puts a lot of thought into it, and he's got his own YouTube channel, and I would highly recommend checking it because he's got stuff all over the place. So I'd highly recommend checking out his YouTube channel if you are so inclined. And then finally, our team blog. We have a blog that has a wealth of good information out there that you might find interesting over a wide array of topics when it comes to Copilot Studio.